Because we're covering a lot of ground here and do want to have as much time as possible for questions at the end, I'll keep the introductions of our presenters brief, probably because you probably know something about them already, and they have so much stuff I could say I need to be brief anyway. Patrick Palace is our first presenter today. Patrick is a Tacoma-based plaintiff's trial lawyer. His practice emphasizes workers' comp, personal injury, civil rights, and social security matters. Patrick is the current president, as I'm guessing most of you probably know, of the Board of Governors of the Washington State Bar. He's given greatly of his time and talents over many years to a variety of county, state, and national legal organizations, including the Board of Governors that he presently presides over, the Washington State Access to Justice Board, the American Bar Institute, and the American Bar Foundation. In his spare time, quote unquote, I guess, Patrick practices meditation and mixed martial arts to further his personal practice of mindfulness. I don't have reason to believe he's had to use his martial arts skill during his tenure as Board of Governors president, but I'm confident he takes some degree of pleasure in knowing they're there if he has to use them. Sherry Williams will present second. Over the course of her career, she's been an adjunct professor, a family law lawyer, a prosecutor, and most recently a public defender in Pierce County. Sherry is a registered yoga teacher who teaches yoga, meditation, and mindfulness-based stress reduction. It's a program at various locations in Seattle and Tacoma. And she is one of 3 founding members of the Washington Contemplative Lawyers that meets weekly at the bar offices, and there's a green single sheet that looks like most of you picked up out front that describes that particular program if you should have an interest in that. So with that, I will turn it over to our presenters, and Patrick Palace first.
So several years ago, I had the opportunity to go to a trip to Cuba. It's kind of a comparative law trip. And you know what it's like as you're heading on to vacation, because there's a couple of things to do, right? All the emails to get answered. Got to take care of the kids, make sure the house, the dog, those things are taken care of, right? Summary judgment, you have to get that written, that gets out before you go. Make sure the office is taken care of. I mean, the laundry list just goes and goes and goes, and you run like a crazy person for the days, hours, and minutes up to the time that you leave. And you wonder, at least I do sometimes, isn't it easier if I just didn't go on vacation? I just stay home. It's less work. So I brought with me my iPad, and I brought with me my smartphone, because I knew on vacation that I would be working. I would be looking at emails and doing things. There just wasn't a chance to get it all done in time. And so I took it on the plane, and I landed in Cuba, and I stepped off the plane, and it's just like they say. You step right off into 1959. The old cars, the old infrastructure. It's a different time. But I had my smartphone and my iPad. At least so I thought. Because I immediately found out that I wasn't going to be able to talk on my smartphone or get text messages or give them or send emails, because there wasn't that kind of infrastructure there in Cuba. I was suddenly cut off from the outer world. I was cut off from my office and opposing counsel. I was cut off from the bar. I was cut off from all the things that I was used to having. And so I walked those streets those first couple of days. And at first it was really hard, because I'd think of emails to send and things I had to do. But after a while, I kind of relaxed into it and realized, hey, this is nice. All of that weight on my shoulders of things that I had to do and I knew I'd have to respond to was just gone. I was free. I could walk the streets knowing that my phone wasn't going to beep, no phone calls were coming in, and I could spend time just being with me and friends and running around Cuba, and it was so enlightening for me. And it probably would have never happened but for the imposition by Cuba. They took away all of that stuff. Otherwise, I probably would have never found it on my own. The fun thing about Cuba is that time is free. I mean, it's like they're handing out free money, but it's free time. And you can spend it. You can just splurge it. You can be frivolous with it. Stay up all night? Okay. We went to a restaurant, and a waiter took our order and then left. And he was gone so long, I'm pretty sure that he got hungry and went to another restaurant and ordered food for himself. But that was okay, because time was free. Time was easy. We had it to spend. And during that time, it gave me a chance to reflect inwardly about what it meant to have that time and to be able to talk with people without the burden of all of the electronics. And so as I came back, I made a list of things that I was going to do different when I came back to my office. And here's my short list. The first lesson that I learned in Cuba was stop and have a cappuccino every day. They say a cafe, whatever, a cup of coffee. Stop and do that. No matter how busy you are, take that time. It's an important time to stop and reflect and be present. The second thing that I learned is put away your iPhone and iPad and all of that. Just put it away. There's that fear that if you don't get instant information or don't respond right away, that something bad's going to happen. You're going to miss something really critical. I haven't. I didn't. I'm not. Turn it off. Take some time to yourself. More is not better. Faster is not better. Faster and more is not happier. And the last thing that I brought back from Cuba was the idea that I should spend more time not Facebooking, but face-looking. Right? Spend more time with people. Spend less time with the screen. Take that time to build relationships. Have relationships. Enjoy people. Make that time that you're otherwise losing to all of your electronic devices. I made a point to myself that rather than saying to people that you see in the grocery store or you run across in the hallway saying, "Gotta run," now I try to say, "Can you join me?" And that's my cue to myself when I see people. Never say, "Gotta run." Good to see you. Right? Can you join me? So with these things, I hadn't realized it at the time, but I had stumbled on some of the basic tenets, some of the basic parts of mindfulness and what it brings to your life. And I had meditated and was an active yogi before I went down to Cuba, but I'm not sure that I really appreciated what all of it meant or exactly how it worked until I had those days to really see how it fit into my life. So you get the advantage of two things today. One is you get to hear about mindfulness, and we're going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about it in a couple different ways. But then with Sherry Williams, not only do you get to hear about it, but we get to all do it. I think this is probably the first lawyers-based webinar in the country focused on mindfulness, where you're actually going to get a chance to do it. And I'm proud of that. And that's going out across the country as a new model for what people like lawyers need in their life to help balance life and decrease stress and be happier. And so I'm glad that all of you have chosen to be on this journey from the very beginning with us. So let me just talk about a couple of basic things about mindfulness that comes down, I think, at its simplest form to pause. Just pausing. There's a number of reasons why you should just stop and you should pause. And I'm going to give you a couple. And here's the first, and maybe the most important, maybe not, but one that's critical, I think, for me. If you don't pause to reflect in life, you run the risk of navigating life blindly. Yogi Berra is one of my favorite people. I think I can pick out a quote from Yogi Berra for just about any topic. And fortunately, Yogi Berra is good for mindfulness too. Here's what Yogi says. If you don't know where you're going, you might end up someplace else. God bless him. I wrote about this in the blog, if those of you saw the blog article about this. Richard Leder is a gentleman who spent a great deal of his life researching. And he did a study of 1,000 people. And these are people all towards the end of their life. And they were all successful career people, successful businesses and careers. And he asked them all about what they would do different, whether they had regrets, what they would change. And there was a common theme that came back from these 1,000 people. And they said this, and these are Richard's words. They got so caught up in the doing that they missed the meaning. They overwhelmingly wished they had stopped at regular intervals to look at the big picture. You've heard this before, I'm sure. No one ever died regretting having not spent enough hours at work, right? It's important that we take time to reflect along the way, along our journey in life, to see where it is we're heading, to see where it is we are, to make sure that we're navigating in the right path. Otherwise, one year you wake up and your kids are gone and your career's over here, and wait a minute, that's not the career I intended to have. How did I get over here? These aren't the goals I wanted to achieve. These are. How did I get so off course? You only do that by stopping and reflecting on where you are and where you've been, so you make sure you're heading in a path that makes you happy. It's a path that you want to achieve. One of my favorite authors, Stephen Kiva, wrote a book now over 10 years ago called Transforming Practice, Finding Joy and Satisfaction in the Legal Life. And Stephen Kiva has a list of things, checking points to ask yourself, to make sure that you're taking time to reflect inwardly, to make sure that you are living the kind of life that you want, that you are balancing the life the way you should. And I want to read through these and ask you to think about this as they reflect in your life. Ask yourself this. Are you working too much? Are you spending most, if not all, waking hours on intellectual pursuits? Are you neglecting your body and ignoring the importance of physical well-being? Do you have rapid mood swings? Are you making play into work, taking leisure activities too seriously and becoming over-competitive? Are you neglecting friends and family? Are you failing to take time for quiet reflection? And then he has another list for the things that maybe aren't so obvious. Are you spending too much time thinking about the past or the future and too little time being aware of what's happening right here in the present? Are you eating unconsciously without concern for whether you are really hungry or even for what the food tastes like? Are you sleeping too little? Are you sleeping too much? Do you frequently feel restless and irritable? Do you find yourself that you are rarely, or maybe even never, being aware of the sacredness of every day? And are you frequently going to bed at night and feeling that somehow your day was incomplete? Now, that's quite a list. And I'm willing to say, if I ask you to hold up your hand, if any of those related to you, everybody would probably say, yeah, one of those fits me or part of those fit me. I think those are universal, right? They speak to all of us. But some of you can identify with a lot of those. And that's a warning sign to you that maybe it's time to sit back and look at balance in your life. Maybe rebalance what's going on in your life. Mindfulness is one of those tools that we use to help do that. And that's the purpose of this seminar, to talk about mindfulness and the tools you have at your disposal. Maybe many of you use them today, others will be learning about them today, but to help you do things like rebalance and recalibrate. So let me start here. Let's talk about making space in your life. Pausing to give your brain some space. Think about what it is you do every day. Answering emails, answering your phone, solving problems, dealing with the kids, making sure those things are taken care of, dealing with the house, all the things at work, the motion, the opposing counsel, the judge, right? All the things you're juggling, the shopping list. My God, your brain is like a marathon runner that runs. You run it, and you run it, and you run it, and you run it. And you know what? It's tired. It's breathing heavy, right? Because you're always pushing it. You never give it a rest. So give it a rest. Let your brain be still. Let it catch its breath. And you need that. You need time in your day to stop reacting. Stop reacting. Reset. Recover. There's a woman that I have a great deal of respect for. She was the former general counsel for General Mills Corporation, right? A huge multinational corporation. And she has since left as a lawyer, and she's now the executive director of the Institute for Mindful Leadership. Her name is Janice Martirano. And she says this about mindfulness and leadership, because there's a nexus between the two. She says, a mindful leader embodies leadership presence by cultivating focus, clarity, creativity, and compassion in the service of others. That's what I like about that. By being mindful, by making space in your life, making space to sit and be quiet, you give yourself that opportunity to clarify, to focus, to be compassionate, and to mindfully help others by choice. The process, however, doesn't come today, right now, go. Right? It's like anything else. It takes daily training of the mind to find that space, to make that space. It's kind of like running, right? If you want to run a 10K, you run 3 miles every day. Maybe every couple of weeks you run 5. And then on that race day, you run the 6.2. Or maybe you want to run a marathon, so you train 5 or 10. And then when the day comes, you run that marathon. You train with your brain. It's trained to stop, to go inside, to give it space. So that on that game day, when you're the quarterback and you're called on to make the pass, when you are the lawyer and you're in court and it's your day for closing argument, when it's your day to talk with your ex-spouse, or it's back-talking teenage kid day, or it's I'm late to work and why is that car in front of me so slow day, it is waiting for you. That calm is there. That peace is there. That resilience is there. Because your brain's been rested. You know the place of calm. You know where the place is to go to pull it out on the day and the time and the minute that you need it. I talk to my friends and family about having a vacationed mind. And it's kind of what happened to me in Cuba, right? You go on vacation, you're pretty wound up first couple of days. Some of you are wound up for the entire week, right? And then you start to calm down. And what happens? Well, maybe your sense of humor returns. Maybe you find yourself thinking about different things. You're a little more calm. One of the things that happens to me, I find a lot of creativity comes. All these ideas about business or thing to do at home or ideas with the kids, just flood full of ideas. So much so that I have a place on my phone that I'll open it up and take notes on all the ideas I have. It's called Vacation to Mind. It's all the things I think about a vacation because I know when I'm back home, those disappear and I have to check back into them and remind myself. Another thing that happens on a vacation mind, and maybe this has happened to you, that answers come. Answers just come out of blue sky like a lightning bolt. Zap, right? Last week, what was the name of that actor in that movie? A week later, laying on the beach in Hawaii. Bam! John Wayne. Right? Where did that come from? It came from your mind having a rest and catching up on all the things that you were trying to get done. Answers come out of nowhere. You try to force answers. They don't always come. You let them be, you take time, you give space, and they just arrive. Just a gift arriving to you. So the power of giving your brain some space is that it returns our focus. It helps us see our true priorities. It invigorates creativity and clarity and helps us make good decisions. Sometimes you see in the newspaper a politician has made some decision or said something, and you just shake your head. Why did they do that? That's stupid, right? Well, I'll tell you what, I don't think they're stupid. I think they're very bright people, but I think they have so much to do and so little time to make good decisions that they invariably make bad decisions. If they had space in their lives, they would make better decisions. And the other thing about giving space is you get answers, big and small, in your life. Now, if you don't pause, if you don't make space, then that opposing counsel that just said something to you that you really didn't like, you probably aren't getting that you're getting angry and that you're scared and maybe you're feeling a little bit out of control. You're probably not getting that your buttons just got pushed. You may not be really appreciating that you're about to act in a way that you're not going to be so proud of tomorrow or next week, and maybe not next year, depending on how much you respond. You probably don't realize you're feeling a little overwhelmed and that you just can't seem to find the answer to what you need to do right now, and you don't know why. Because you haven't paused. You haven't stepped away from all of that. You haven't built that space in your mind where that calm resides. Because with that space, with that calm, you can deal with it, right? You're aware of what's happening out there. You can separate yourself from that reaction and begin responding in a way that you will be proud of. You can have the focus because you're not buried in all of that emotion and reaction. You can focus on what needs to get done. And everyone here is probably a Seahawks fan. Everyone's probably a Russell Wilson fan. But have you noticed something that's really amazing about him? So there he is in some clutch play in some big game, and he's got the entire team running at him, and he stands there calmly. And maybe steps this way, and one guy flies that way, and maybe he runs around in a circle here, and he waits, and you think he's going to get pounded, but he waits and he finds the guy he's going to pass to, and then he throws. And it happens. And you throw your arms up, and it's amazing, right? And he does it over and over again. It's his practice of mindfulness and finding space. The world may spin around the rest of us in some whirlwind, but when you're Russell Wilson and you're calm and you're focused and you're aware of what's happening around you, your world almost stops and everyone else is in a hurry, and then you can do your job better. You can be that leader. You can be that trial lawyer. You can be that person who's in control and focused. You make good decisions. And I think that this is part of those skills that make for great leaders. Those people that have that space in their life, that can find that calm, who can always make good decisions in the clutch, can ask the perfect question on cross-examination when the answer was bad before that, who can say the right things in closing, who always finds the right words at the wedding reception, right? I don't know, whatever, you fill in the blank. I think it's those people that have that space and find that space in their lives. It helps you perform better in court. It helps you perform better with your spouse and your ex-spouse, right? It's not a problem, that back-talking teenager anymore. And that car that's going slow while you're late to work, you don't even notice it. You don't even notice it. So what's beyond the pause? So you take that pause. What now? Well, let me start by talking a little bit about some brain basics. Your brain's a pretty cool thing. I mean, it really is. The things that it does, we have to use our brain to try to figure out a little bit of what the brain does, because the brain does boggles our brain. Did you get that? Okay. So every day we use our brain. Every day we build our brain. You heard the old saying, you can't teach old dogs new tricks. Okay? It's a myth. It's wrong. It's not true. We learn every day. We build new pathways, we build new roads, we build new files. We physically change and alter the way our brain looks and what our brain does just by the way we function. There's a really cool study about taxi drivers in New York, about how they physically change their brains. And you can figure, I mean, it's logical, right? So you're a taxi driver and someone hops into your car and you're in New York City and they give you an address and you have to know where to go. That took a lot of work to figure out all of New York City and have it mapped in your brain to know where to go. And then what about the complexity of the change of the traffic conditions throughout the day in the various parts of the city that taxi driver needs to know how to navigate through and around? They found out that because taxi drivers spend so much time focused on things like mapping and figuring out routes, that part of taxi driver's brain literally expanded and grew to be more capable to do more of those things. So the lesson learned from this, and many other studies like it, is that if you frequently focus and pay attention, then you build your brain around those thoughts. We can all change our brain by building our thoughts, any way that we wish to do that. So there's these little guys called neurons, and maybe you haven't studied them since high school, but they're the brain cells that transmit chemicals and electrical signals amongst each other. And these things can group up, right? You get these neural pathways, these neural formations of information that's going from one to the next that is what you use in every part of your life every day. And these neural networks, there's a funny thing about them. One of the lead researchers, Rick Hansen, has written a number of great books about neuroscience and neuropsychology. He says this, and I love it. I quote it to, at parties. Kidding. Neurons that fire together, wire together. It's such an easy concept, right? If you use them, then they become more usable. So I'll give you a quick example. I say, your hair looks fabulous. First thing you say is, I feel good about me. In fact, I feel good about him. I feel good about all this. My hair, feel good, right? So you wire those things together. Next time you look in the mirror, you see your hair, I look pretty good. Next time you meet that person, I sure like him, right? Fire together, wire together. You've built something together there. And if you keep hearing it, you're at the store and someone says, your hair looks great. And someone else, you look fabulous today. What did you do, right? You start to build those pathways. And pretty soon you're glowing everywhere you go. Because, damn, I'm good today. Right? That's part of what happens when you do this. It's where you spend your time thinking that builds these pathways. It's fun because your brain actually forms grooves in the process. So think of your brain and these neurons a little bit like a track, and you're a runner. So if you run around the track once, you start to make a path and a groove. You run around it again, you build the groove a little bit deeper. You keep running around that track, and the groove gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And what you do is you end up hardwiring your brain into that track. That's what the taxi drivers did, right? They hardwired their brain into the map of the city, exactly how to get around it. It's where they spend their time and their focus. Now, the interesting thing about the brain is that you can do this for things that are negative or things that are positive. And I know all of you know what I'm talking about. You've thought about something, and then you think about it again, and it seems to expand exponentially, and then again, and again, and again, and again, and again. Why am I obsessed by this? Go away. You can't. You've already put it in there. It's stuck. And the brain has this you heard about, about fight or flight or survival of the fittest, right? We're made to live. We're made to survive. It's in our DNA. And so when we see something that is negative, that forms a groove very quickly in our hardwired system, because that means death. Things that are really nice, nice things don't kill you. So they don't go in quite as easily. It's a little harder to get the nice things in our brains. So consequently, you go for a job interview or your boss is doing your review, and he says 5 great things, or she says 5 great things and 1 bad thing, and depending on what you hear, you're going to walk out going, God, that was a terrible review. Like, look what he said this 1 bad thing, right? It's because our brain sticks to those things that are bad and sticks to things that are negative. So, for example, you're in the woods and you see a bear, and he stands up and he growls, and you go, oh my God, and you run like crazy to get away from the bear. That's probably something you're going to remember the rest of your life. It is going to be so grooved in, so quick, it's going to be there. In fact, next time someone mentions bear, you break a sweat, right? God help you if you see a bear again, because you're going to be running 90 miles an hour the next time you see that bear, right? It's the way the brain works. It's a little harder with a compliment. And so the key to hardwiring the brain for that happiness, so when you take that pause, it does you something good from inside, is to go through a couple of steps. First, pause. Your hair looks fabulous today. Okay, pause. Appreciate that. Take that in for as long as you can. Some would say 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds. Spend time thinking about that and how it makes you feel. Wire it together. Make it a groove. Run a couple of track loops. Make that part of the way you feel about yourself. It's a game. It's an interesting game, but it's one that's real because that's the way our brain works. So appreciate. Pause, and then appreciate, and then run a few more laps to make it deeper and ingrained and hardwire your brain that way. Russell Wilson, right? Russell Wilson said, it's pretty famous at the time of the Super Bowl, that when he wasn't even the starting quarterback, he said, we're going to the Super Bowl, and I'm going to be the quarterback that wins the game. Luck? Coincidence? I will tell you, by everything I have read about him, every time he threw that ball, it was to win the Super Bowl. Every time he went to practice, it was to win the Super Bowl. It was all focused on that goal. Every time, every day, every practice, every throw. And I will tell you that I think that is exactly what we're talking about. That is hardwiring in one action, one response, one direction, where your energy goes, what's going to happen. He hardwired it in and didn't relent because that was the only reality that existed in his brain. And a lot of athletes are like that. Even when they're up against odds that they can't beat, they say, I'm going to win. I got this thing. I'm going to do this. And then they surprise us and they do it. A lot of people do that. We as lawyers do that in our trials and with fighting for justice. It's where we live. It's what we do. And we're hardwired to do it that way if we put our energy there and make it happen. But you get your choices, right, about this fight or flight. I was in the San Juans over the weekend. We had this listening tour. We went around and spoke to people across the bar about our bar. And I ended up, I guess, kind of getting stuck in the San Juans and had to get back. And so the way to get back was through a float plane. For those of you that know me, I don't like to fly. I have to do it all the time, but I am not a big flyer. And being in a float plane and taking off on the water and flying was not really very easy for me. And then the float plane had to land 3 times, up and down 3 times before we headed to Seattle, right? So I had my practice in there. But I realized pretty quick that I had my options about this flight. I could do this. I could say, oh my God, I'm going to die. It's going to crash. Why are the wings doing that? Why is it bumpy? Right? And freak out because this is scaring the crap out of me. Or I could say, God, look at the view. Look at the islands. Look at the sun. Are those whales down there? How lucky am I to be here? How peaceful and beautiful is this? What a great ride. What a fun chance. What a wonderful adventure in my life to have this opportunity to be sitting right here today. Do you see the difference in the hardwiring? One, if I'm freaking out, by the time I get off that plane and pry my knuckles off the door, I may never want to fly again, and you're going to have to shoehorn me into a plane if I'm going to go. And it makes it really, really hard. And the other one, you start to form this idea that flying really isn't so bad. It's pretty cool. It's pretty nice. Now, I will tell you, I am not that perfect model that came out going, God, that was wonderful, right? It wasn't me. But it wasn't as bad as it could have been. I spend my time relaxing, using my mindful meditation, finding the calm, breathing, and trying to enjoy everything about it, and telling myself how lucky I was to be there. And it really helped to buffer that. It's not an instant answer, but it makes a difference when you're there. And it'll make a difference when you're in court and looking for, what did the judge just say? What did opposing counsel just say? I got to find an answer. You find that calm, and you find that answer, and you find that focus. We call this process of choosing to get rid of the bad, right? Get rid of the negative and put in something more positive, pulling weeds and planting flowers, right? Your brain's a garden. You want it full of beautiful flowers. You don't want it full of these weeds that are negative and getting in your way and stopping your performance and telling you can't do it. So when you have those places, you want to rewire those neurons to say good things, not bad. Pull out that weed, plant the happy flower. And here's kind of the trick to this. This is like the advanced training, right? So you got the pause, and maybe even you've appreciated the negative and the positive, but you really can shift the negative into the positive. Someone says, I don't like your hair. And you can say, personally, I did love my hair, or I feel pretty good about me, or, my wife was very supportive about that. Said I looked great when I headed out the door today and straightened out my suit, whatever, and put something positive in its place. It's a little more challenging, but if you listen to the negative, you build a path of negative. If you don't listen to the negative and put positive things in its place, it builds the positive, and then you have a positive outlook. And right? Have we all met people like that? Always happy about things, always positive about things, always looking on the bright side, half full versus half empty, right? It's kind of what I'm talking about. So these are tools that you have every day to build new connections, to look at life the way you choose to look at life, to build positive connections, to rewire your brain in a way that works for you to be happier. And it all starts with that pause. So I want to leave you with these thoughts. Probably the most important is that mindfulness starts just with a pause. Take time to reflect on your life. Make sure you're always headed in the right direction. If you're not, take time to rebalance your priorities. Give your brain time to reset and to recover, and give it some space. Stop multitasking all the time. Turn off your phone. Turn off your computer. Get rid of all that white noise and just be there with yourself once in a while. Respond. Don't react when all your emotions arise. Separate from them and take a step back. Rewire your brain with positive experiences at every opportunity that you get. Pull those weeds, plant flowers. Take time to cultivate your inner strength and your calm by regularly practicing the pause and mindful meditation. That's your training to build this so it's there whenever you need it. And mindfulness, it may not be the answer, but I tell you, it will give you some answers and it will help you along the way. And like Russell Wilson, it just might, lead to something much bigger. Thank you. Namaste.
Patrick's talk reminded me of one of my favorite quotes from Lily Tomlin. For fast relief, try slowing down. So, if you can start the day without caffeine, if you can always be cheerful, ignoring aches and pains, if you can resist complaining and boring people with your troubles, if you can eat the same food every day and be grateful for it, if you can understand when loved ones are too busy to give you time, if you can take criticism and blame without resentment, if you can conquer tension without medical help, if you can relax without alcohol, if you can sleep without the aid of drugs, then you are probably a dog. For the rest of us, there's practice. And with practice, perhaps you too can gain a bit more inner peace. A story. A small boy, struggling to understand the world, once asked his grandfather to explain the nature of good and evil. There are two wolves fighting inside me all the time, said the grandfather. One wolf is full of things like hatred, ill will, violence, and greed. The other wolf is full of things like love and compassion, kindness, and generosity. Which wolf wins the fight? Asked the little boy. The one I feed, said the grandfather. So while I'm not addressing good and evil today, let me be perfectly clear about that. I am suggesting that you do get better at whatever you practice in your life, whatever wolf you feed in your life. So it might behoove us to look closely at what we are practicing on a daily basis and to explore, with a little self-compassion, some options for reducing the stress in our personal and professional lives. You may have noticed that mindfulness is referenced everywhere these days. But what is it, and where can we get some? Allow me to offer one definition from John Kabat-Zinn, who created a program at the University of Massachusetts Medical Center around 35 years ago, now called Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction, or MBSR for short. By the way, there are MBSR classes now offered all over the globe, in schools, in technology, programs in corporate offices, in mental health treatment, in jails, in prisons, in sports, in healthcare, in the military, in legal education, and in programs for lawyers specifically, today being an example. So, in theory, this should work. Let's see. We have to find. There is John Kabat-Zinn's definition, which goes like this. Mindfulness is the awareness that becomes apparent when we pay attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. So I had a teacher once who said, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And the main thing here is awareness. So let's explore awareness today. And there's no better place to start than to begin with your own body and breath. So I invite you to stand up. Put down your lunch, put down your stuff, and those of you who are out there in great internet land, put down your iPhones and your iPads or whatever you happen to have, and please join us. Now, nobody's going to know if you're doing this out there in internet land, but I'm going to ask you to join with us nevertheless. And if for whatever reason you need to stay seated, you can still join us while seated. Because let's just take 2 or 3 shoulder rolls first, as you roll your shoulders up and back. And notice, what is there today? Is there any tightness in those shoulders? Maybe you go back to front. Maybe you go side to side. Doesn't matter. Just check in with yourself and see, how are your shoulders feeling today? What do you notice there, if anything? And then easy release of the head. Maybe for your head it feels best just to go back and forth. Or maybe easy from side to side. Or if it feels okay for you, you can easily take circle, gentle circle. You might hear a little crunchy, cracking kinds of things. But just notice, is there any tightness in the neck? Probably, of some sort. And when you've had a chance to go once or twice each way, then take a big reach up. Reach up. And maybe reach with one arm just stretching as far as you can reach it, and then the other arm just reaching it as far as you can reach it. And notice, maybe once or twice more on each side. Is one side a little tighter than the other? Maybe, maybe not. And if you like, you could grab hold of one wrist or leave your arms long and just gently, just stretch gently without forcing anything, and just feeling a little stretch along the side of the body. What's there? Is there some tightness? Maybe there's a little pain, but just noticing what's there as you take your time and try the other direction. Maybe there's a little stretch, one side may be a little easier to work than the other. Just noticing what's here today. And then maybe giving your arm a little shake. And giving your other arm a little shake. And giving one leg a little shake. And giving the other leg a little shake. And then giving the whole body a big shake. And if you like, doing it again and adding a little sound. Once more, nice and loud as you can go. And maybe a third time, just for fun. And then just standing still. Close your eyes for a moment and just notice. What's here? Is my heart going? Is my breath maybe picked up a little bit? Do I feel maybe a little pulsation or a little circulation sensation in my body? Maybe I don't feel anything at all. Not a problem. It's just noticing what's there in this particular moment. Whatever it happens to be, with a little kindness, little self-compassion. And when it's settled down a little bit, you can sit back down, and thank you for joining us. There's a line in a James Joyce novel that goes like this. Mr. Duffy lived a short distance from his body. And most of us tend to live from the head up in this culture. So to notice, to bring awareness to what sensations are present in the body. To notice, to bring awareness to what's happening with the breath. These are important skills in themselves, and one of the reasons millions of people practice yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, to develop this awareness of body and breath in each moment. So now that we've loosened up a little bit, has anyone here ever felt stressed? You know, I saw a bumper sticker once that said, "A job without stress is called a hobby." Well, you might be able to relate to this cartoon, and I don't know if you can see what it says, but it says, with the fellow who's got a little space left in front of him, "No, not there, please. That's where I'm going to put my head." And that reminds me of a lot of lawyers that I know, a lot of caseloads that are too large. Just generally speaking, that kind of stress that we face daily. But first off, let's acknowledge that not all stress is detrimental. A certain amount of stress can be motivating. And our ability to fight, flee, or freeze, lose your voice, has kept the species going for a very long time. But what happens when we're chronically stressed without adequate recovery? Any ideas? What's some of the things you might notice in yourself or your family or your friends? Just raise your hand and yell it out, popcorn style. Yeah. Back pain. What else? Poor sleep. Memory loss. What else? Illnesses. Depression. Anything else? Inability to focus. Heart issues. Digestive problems. We could go on and on and on. What less than ideal coping behaviors might we see? Any ideas for that? What kind of things have you seen in your colleagues or yourself or your friends or your family? Raise your hand and just holler it out. Alcoholism. What else? Slowing way down. Over or under eating. Overworking. Drug and alcohol abuse. Including social media abuse, I might throw in. Addictions of all sorts. Smoking. Anything of these, and leading eventually to some sort of physical or emotional illness or breakdown or even death. So this might be diagrammed like this. We've got a stressor of some sort. Actually, I prefer to think of it in terms of a perceived threat, because it's your perception of something that's crucial here. If you are perceiving something as a threat or you're perceiving something as stressful, oftentimes we just move to reactivity. Stress reactivity. It's usually called flight, freeze. Just knee-jerk reaction, unconscious reactivity. Some people call it amygdala hijack. If you're familiar with some little neuroscience terms, you're just taking a ride, your brain's taking you for a ride. I like to think of it as life on simmer, which is for a lot of us, I think, just the way we live, this constant, you're just always on the verge, always on the verge. Think of some examples. Maybe opposing counsel files a motion on Christmas Eve. Boom. You're handed a colleague's file and told to go cover an important hearing in half an hour. Boom. Or someone cuts you off on the freeway. The expletives fly, and you are absolutely convinced they did it on purpose, to you specifically, intentionally, just to ruin your particular morning. Or think of your own example. Maybe close your eyes for a second and just contemplate that from the endless scenarios that you probably have in your own personal and professional lives. Just think of a stressful event that you've had recently and remember or notice, what were the body sensations? What was going on in your body? What thoughts arose? What were the emotions that were there? Is this a familiar state? Probably. But fortunately, we do have some choice in this regard. There are some options. Thanks to neuroplasticity. Can we all say that together? Neuroplasticity. I love that word. It's a wonderful word. It really means that during the last 30 years or so, neuroscience has discovered that we can literally change our mind. We can literally change our brain. We can teach old dogs new tricks. And mindfulness meditation, as skills training, as simply as skills training, has repeatedly been shown to be effective in developing the awareness that we've been talking about, the awareness that facilitates these changes, often resulting in stress reduction or increased equanimity, among many other health benefits. So what is mindfulness meditation? Well, let's take a few minutes and explore it for yourself. Again, those folks on internet, please don't walk away or go to the bathroom or check your emails. I'd like you to join us. Granted, we won't know that you are, but I am going to hope that you cut yourself a little slack here and just experiment a little bit. And if you're willing, please place your feet flat on the floor. And if you can, sit a little bit forward in your chair so you are not collapsing against the backrest, unless you truly need it for support. And place your hands in your lap or on your thighs and find a nice long but not forced spine. Take your shoulders up to your ears, give them a big squeeze and drop them down. Soften the shoulders. And close your eyes. Or perhaps just gaze softly a foot or so in front of you. Perhaps take a deep inhale or exhale, or 2 or 3. And if you like, you could put one hand on your heart and one hand on your belly. And just notice, where do you feel the breath? Maybe you feel it more by the nose, or by the heart, or way down deep in your belly. But wherever you feel the breath the easiest, without trying to manipulate it or change it in any way, just begin to be aware of the breath. And take that awareness, pay attention to the rise and the fall of each inhale and exhale. Notice the pauses between the inhale and the exhale. And notice what's here in this particular moment, whatever it happens to be. Be curious. We're going to sit here just for a few moments and see what's rising up today. So I'm with you on this. And as we sit together, or stand, or whatever you happen to be doing, if you're on the internet and at home, maybe you're with other folks or in your office, just sit. Eyes closed or eyes softly open a little bit in front. breathing in and breathing out. Very simple, but not necessarily easy. Might not take terribly long before you maybe discover a body sensation starting to rise. Maybe something in the hip or the neck or the shoulder or the back. Without trying to change it at all, just, what's here? What is this? Maybe it's a little tingling or maybe a burning or what is it exactly? Just be curious. Maybe breathing into that area, allowing the breath to maybe soften around it. Maybe it'll change. It often does. Everything does change, so perhaps it moves to a different part of the body. Maybe it gets worse, and certainly you're welcome to shift your posture if you feel like you're going to injure yourself. And then go back to the breath, over and over and over. Training yourself how to take your attention where you want it to go, which in this case is simply to the breath. Or perhaps it hasn't taken long for you to discover that the mind has a mind of its own, and off you've gone somewhere, maybe into some sort of thinking, or maybe some sort of emotion is arising. And without following it down any rabbit hole in particular, you just notice that. Maybe you say to yourself, thinking, or restless, or bored, or whatever it happens to be, and back to the breath, over and over and over. It's like training a puppy. Off it wanders, you bring it back. Off it wanders, you bring it back. Don't hit the puppy, or at least hopefully. Kindly, self-compassionately, start again with the very next breath. So for the last remaining moments or two, if you've been hauled off somewhere, just again, notice that. Return to the breath. What's here? What's here now? Body sensations of some sort, perhaps. Breath coming in, breath going out, pauses between. Thoughts rising, lingering, and passing away. Perhaps feelings rising, lingering, passing away. Just this. Very slowly, begin to open your eyes and wiggle your fingers and toes. Perhaps take some sort of stretch if that feels good to you. Let's see what you discovered. Perhaps you might relate to this card that I received from someone a while back. On the front of it, it says, "I tried meditation." Open it up and it says, "I think I was doing it wrong. My meditation was, oh my God, I've got so much to do. I can't believe I am sitting here wasting time breathing instead of picking up my dry cleaning and making flight plans for next week. And hey, my chest hurts. Maybe I should see a doctor." Anyone experience anything along that line? Yeah? Yes. Well, just begin to notice for yourself. Were you able to keep your attention on the breath? Did you notice the body sensations? Any thoughts call you off or emotions rising? So what does this have to do with my stress level, you might be asking? Well, perhaps you might have an epiphany. You don't have to spin around in the rat cage. And the epiphany has to do with your innate capacity for awareness. So let's look at another variation of this slide. Sometimes this is called mindfulness-mediated stress response as opposed to stress reactivity. The difference here is the capital A for awareness. Once again, we've got a perceived threat of some sort, but that capital A, the crucial difference is this awareness that has developed through contemplative practices, whether it's mindfulness meditation or yoga or whatever contemplative practice you favor. It's the awareness that allows us to stop. If you take nothing else from today, maybe you can just remember to stop the next time you're confronted with some sort of stressor or perceived stressor or a perceived threat. Simply just stop. Pause, as Patrick put it. And then take 3 breaths, deliberately, consciously. Taking 3 breaths. For one thing, it kicks in your parasympathetic nervous system, begins to slow the fight, flight, freeze reaction down. It also gives you a moment to observe what is going on. What is going on here? What is going on with my breath? Is my heart beating faster? Are my palms sweaty? Is my stomach sick? Maybe I'm afraid. Am I frightened? Am I angry? Am I sad? What is the emotion arising? What thoughts are going on here? So that the knowing of what's happening with yourself allows you to make some choices. How shall I choose to respond? What is the most skillful way to respond to what's ever in front of me in this particular moment? It can happen like that. It doesn't take long. To just stop and respond in a more skillful way to whatever we're confronted with instead of reacting to unconscious, automatic pilot, knee-jerk, maladaptive ways. But what does this have to do with my legal practice, you might be wondering? Well, over time, as you practice and develop this awareness, and it does take practice. It's no different than going to the gym. You go to the gym, you lift, and you get bigger biceps. You sit. 5 minutes. Most people can go 5 minutes. If not, just start with 1 minute. On a daily basis, over time, this awareness will develop, this capacity to begin to take it off the cushion, so to speak, and into the rest of your life, which is really the point. You can develop what some people have called a meditative perspective. And in your resource list, there's a link to a document called the Meditative Perspective. And I would ask you to take a look at that and really contemplate it. Not now. Stay with me for now. All it is the resource list just has the link. But I ask you to, when you can, take a look at that in greater depth. It does reference some potential benefits. First one, increased wisdom and creativity. And I can read a little bit from the document. By promoting flexibility of mind and heart and the ability to gain insight into and perhaps even let go of habitual patterns when appropriate and needed, the meditative perspective allows us to open to new approaches and strategies, helping us to solve problems and accomplish objectives more effectively. 2, a sensitive and realistic sense of ethics. We become more aware of the discomfort that comes from deviating from our values and considering unethical conduct, enlarging our resolution not to allow this to occur. 3, focus and stability. There is more moment-to-moment focus in every situation, whether it's drafting a document, talking on the phone, meeting with a client, appearing in court. Such clear and focused presence enhances effectiveness, and it also promotes stability and calmness. It's an excellent antidote to stress. Focus further promotes empathic and accurate listening with colleagues, opposing counsel, judges, and ourselves. And with listening comes clearer and more effective communication. 4, patience and sustainability. It helps us to approach situations with a fresh perspective and to transform tendencies toward anger and self-righteousness into the energy needed to serve clients and justice more effectively. Lastly, but certainly not least, compassion and empathy. Meditative perspective promotes empathy with clients, colleagues, opponents, and neutrals. Heightens sensitivity to suffering, opens the heart, allowing us to better apprehend difficult situations and handle them with a greater sense of ease. So you may have more that you can think of or know of in your own personal life. Or maybe you're not sure about these. So I would ask you to perhaps reflect on that document and see if it works for you, if it resonates with you, if any of this has value for your personal or professional life. And perhaps we could all benefit from these values and states of beings and skills, both personally and professionally. So allow me to close with the conclusion from Leonard Riskin's 2002 Harvard Negotiation Law Review article. At its very best, mindfulness practice can help lawyers see things as they actually are, to hold in their awareness dramatically inconsistent thoughts and impulses and beliefs. Thus, mindfulness, properly practiced, ought not to exclude traditional adversarial perspectives from a lawyer's consciousness. It should not disable lawyers from doing what is necessary to protect their clients. Instead, it should allow them to virtually see all perspectives. Thus, it can help them accept the reality and the impermanence of greed and selfishness, as well as kindness and generosity in themselves and others. This understanding, supported by patience, wisdom, and compassion, might help lawyers maintain the clarity and delicate balance essential for making wise choices. So, what wolf are you feeding in your personal and professional life? Perhaps take some time to notice and see if you might want to practice something new, knowing that you can always begin again in the very next breath. So thank you for your attention, and we should have time for a few questions. But before we take those questions, I want to take a moment just to thank Michael Badger from the Lawyer Assistance Program and the Lawyer Assistance Program in general for asking to offer this program and to bring us aboard. I'd like to thank Patrick, Rhonda McGee, and actually like to special shout out to some Pierce County judges, John McCarthy, Susan Serco, Margaret Ross, Claire Sussman, and retired David Kenworthy for their support and encouragement in this work. And especially acknowledge Sevilla Rhodes, Avi Littman, and Greg Woke, who have been showing up every Monday noon hour for the last 3 years or so to host the Washington Contemplative Lawyer Sessions at the bar office. This is in addition to their efforts at CLEs, retreats, numerous presentations, and families in full-time stressful legal practices. So deep bow to you three. Take a look at the website listed on your resource handout and come join them next Monday at noon. Now, any questions that we might have?
Let me just ask if anyone has a question to raise your hand so that we can get a mic to you so that the people online can hear the question as well. And because this is not a credit CLE, we can run a little past 1:30 if we wish. The presenters have graciously allowed their availability past that time. So just raise your hand if you have a question. I'll get it.
Just curious, are we leading the wave nationwide?
Who, by we?
Washington.
Actually, I
you
would.
All.
You are, yes. Honestly, this has been going on for quite some time, and I would encourage you, if you have not read Rhonda McGee's article in it's the April-May issue of the Washington Bar News. Well, I guess it's now Northwest Lawyer. Northwest Lawyer. Rhonda McGee did a wonderful article tracing the history of this. This has been coming for a long, long time. So I'd say that Washington is certainly not running the show by any means. This has been coming for decades. But there has been some interest in Washington State that is maybe indicative of the rising interest globally, nationally, in the legal profession, generally speaking. There's more and more of this brought into legal education. So I would just encourage you, rather than to going on and on from my perspective, to read Rhonda's article.
Sure, and I would add to that, I think we are the first bar to dedicate our bar magazine to the idea of mindfulness. As I've met with presidents across the country and talked about things like mindfulness, there are some that are aware, and there's been pocket programs here or there, but I don't think there's been one like this anywhere in the country. And I think we are taking the lead as lawyers, maybe not as practitioners of Washingtonians, but as lawyers. I think we are setting the path for other states to follow.
Let me give you a question that came from an online viewer. And you kind of touched on this a bit in your comment, Sherry, but the question is, how do I keep my mind from going to a focus on things I'm anxious about when I succeed in hitting pause?
Read that again.
How do I keep my mind from going to a place where I focus only on things I'm anxious about when I succeed in hitting pause?
In hitting pause.
Yeah.
Practice. How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice. Practice, practice, practice. what I might suggest is that they begin, whoever that person is, and this applies for all of us, is to begin to explore a mindfulness meditation practice. There's lots of different approaches, lots of different schools of thought on this. So my particular take is I have more of a Vipassana meditation background. In my particular training, I would probably just go, anxiety feels like this, and back to the breath. It's not about necessarily, from my perspective, you're not getting rid of what's inherently human, where you're not going to get rid of your thinking. You're not going to get rid of your feelings or your body sensations. From my perspective, it's to be aware of them, to work with them, to know that they're just thoughts, that they're just feelings, that they arise and they pass away, as does everything else. But you can learn how to be with them so that when anxiety rises, it's just anxiety. It's just anxiety. Anxiety feels like this. And back to the breath. And this kind of ability is developed on the cushion, so to speak. It takes some time before you can use it in the rest of your life. But that's the point, is to use it in the rest of your life. So there's formal practices where you actually train yourself, perhaps, sitting in your chair or on your cushion or whatever practice form you take. But then there's the informal practices of how you take this into your life. You notice, how do I eat? How do I talk to people? What am I consuming? What am I taking in? Not just only in food, but what do I watch? What news do I take in? How do I treat people? What wolf am I feeding? If you could wake up every morning and just say to yourself, what wolf am I going to feed today? What am I practicing? And make some choices around it. Hopefully that answers that question. Anything you want to add?
You mentioned some of the judges that are with it now. Do we know about our own Supreme Court or the U.S. Supreme Court mindfulness?
I don't know about other judges. I know there are certainly judges, and Sherry touched on some in Pierce County that have been part of a group of doing this. But it's about people, and I'm sure there are a number of judges, many judges, like there are many lawyers who have a practice and use that practice.
And there are judges, believe it or not, on the Supreme Court who do practice. So I don't know as they want me to publicize their names at this point, but there are, amazingly enough. So.
Another question from a viewer online. Is mindfulness a type of meditation? If not, how does the mindfulness practice and meditation complement one another?
Say that one more time.
Is mindfulness a type of meditation? If not, how does the mindfulness practice and meditation complement each other?
Mindfulness really is just awareness. Mindfulness just means being aware of what's happening in the moment that it's happening. And I can refer you back to John Kabat-Zinn's definition again. Mindfulness is the awareness that becomes apparent when we pay attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. So mindfulness meditation is just a particular form of meditation. It's come out of ancient wisdom traditions, mostly from Southeast Asia, but they're secular practices now. There's nothing inherently, this is not a religious practice. This is a secular skills training practice at this point. So mindfulness meditation is just a form of training how to focus the mind. Anything else? So I would encourage you truly to begin. There are so many places where you can go in Seattle and actually all over Washington State. There are many, many, many different places that offer training in meditation. And it's, one of my yoga teachers used to like to say, and I think it's true, he used to say, the house of yoga has many rooms, and it's true of meditation too. So it's a matter of finding a style that you are comfortable with, a teacher that you feel comfortable with, a practice that you feel comfortable with, and then sticking to it. And seeing and being curious for yourself. Don't take anything that I say or Patrick says and believe it. It's really, this is about your own journey, your own exploration to see, is there some value in this for me? Is there something here that I could benefit by or from? And to explore it for yourself and find something that resonates with you. It can be through yoga practice, it can be through Qigong, it can be through Tai Chi. It doesn't have to be sitting on the cushion, but there are all kinds of approaches to developing this skill. And it is a skill, and it can be learned. Okay. Anything else?
Thank you all for making time to put this in your life and being here today. I appreciate your time and your attention and your goodwill. And thank you, Sherry, for making so much of it possible. And thank you, Michael Badger.
And back at you, thank you so much on behalf of the Lawyer Assistance Program for taking part in this today. And
Great. So thank you.